Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to another Adobe live stream. I'm your host, Fabiola Lara. Today on the stream, we're joined by creative director and fine artist, Melissa Showers. We're so excited to have you here today, Melissa. Are you so amped to be showing us your process today?
I am. Thank you so much for having me, Fabiola. I'm so excited to be here with everybody that's watching. So thanks for tuning in. And I'm going to be sharing some of my work and my creative process for day one character design.
Amazing. So before we get started, if you missed the show before ours, please be sure to watch the replays. You can always catch those here at Adobe Live. Plus, check out the Creative Cloud Express streams on Monday and Tuesday mornings. This week, Voodoo Val will show us how to get started in the easy-to-use app and create content for your Patreon. Start your day with creative encores of the Photoshop Creative Challenges hosted by Sam Peterson every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Tune in, challenge yourself with a new prompt each and every day. Now, if you're tuning in from YouTube, please come on over to Behance. You can come to behance.net/Adobe Live, join the chat, talk with us. This way, Melissa can be sure to answer your questions that I'll be sharing with her. So drop your questions into our chat, come say hi, and let's have a good time here today. It's going to be really fun. And remember, you can watch the live streams even when we're offline. So bookmark this page so you can come back to it whenever you need a little refresh and you want to catch up again on Melissa's process that she's going to be showing us today. Now, let me see what we have going on in the chat today. I'm very pumped. Let's check it out here. Who we have. I'm sure we have so many people here. The creative community here at Adobe Live is always amazing. Hello, Anthony. Hello, Elizabeth. Wade. Shout out to Wade today. Richard, Oliver Andrews. We have so many people joining us today, Melissa. All right, it's time for you to let us know more about yourself and tell us what we're up to today. What are we getting into, Melissa? Give it to us.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining. Like I said, my name is Melissa Showers. I'm a fine artist and creative director, and I'm based out of Houston, Texas. I have started my journey when I was just a little girl, drawing on tall stacks of Xerox paper with my mom in the kitchen. And I have climbed my way through art school and different jobs to try and kind of find my dream. And I've really delved into digital illustration and always use Adobe products along the way. So today I'm going to do a quick share of my Behance page. I love Behance. I'm very active on here. And here's my page, which you can kind of see the progression of my style of illustrations. Before I had access to iPad and Adobe Fresco, I used a lot of Illustrator for my vector illustrations. So if you scroll to the bottom, you can see a much more simple version of my style. And I'm just going to quickly show you guys one of my favorite projects. It's kind of a labor of love. I've challenged myself to be a little more realistic, and I did this in Adobe Fresco as well, from a reference drawing. And it's one of those things where you do pixel by pixel and you take forever doing it. And then in the end, when you get to smudge it all together, it just comes to life. And so one of the things I'm actually the most proud of are her teeth, because I never thought they would actually look like teeth when I was doing it pixel by pixel. And I usually live stream during a lot of my process on Behance itself. So I like to download all of those live streams at the end, put them into Premiere, and then I'll make like a time-lapse drawing of everything. So you can always see that at the end of my work. And so here's where it's obviously many hours sped up very quickly, pixel by pixel, smudging and making it come to life. So that's always like the most satisfying part of a lot of my digital illustrations that are more realistic. So it's something that, you know, if you want to take a look, you can jump on Behance and follow me there. You can also follow me on Instagram. So
Yes,
that's a
those
little
teeth
bit
are
about
so
that.
realistic. I'm like
Yeah.
shocked. The teeth are so hard to draw, like so under, like you never think that it's going to be so hard to draw it until you're doing it.
Yeah, and it's funny because you never think like when you're drawing teeth that there'll be anything like other than white, but it's
Yes.
so many different colors. So yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Shout out. I'm so excited to be. Is that the kind of work we're going to be working on today?
So today is going to be a little more simple. That process takes a long time,
Yeah.
and I just didn't think it would be a good live stream. So today we're going to be I'm going to be showing you this character design in Adobe Fresco on the iPad. So this is the finished piece, and I saved all of my layers into different groups. So I'll walk through the process with you guys. And I always start off my pieces with like a reference photo, and usually I'll get that from Adobe Stock. So I pulled her from Adobe Stock, and I just thought she was really cool. She's got this kind of like chill attitude, and I like to like connect with the pieces that I'm drawing, and it usually depends on like my mood. So I thought she would be really fun to draw. I have a Gen Z child, so he also thought it was cool, and I was like, okay, if you think it's cool, then I'm going to draw it. So I just popped her on, so she's in one of the top layers, and then now I can kind of hide some layers and show you where I get started with this.
Yes. Let's see how we go from start to finish here today. It's going to be an exciting process. You guys, we're in Adobe Fresco. If you missed it, on the iPad, such a fun tool and such a fun way to draw.
It really is. And it's for me, it's like the best of both worlds. Because you have vector and pixel. So
I know you can just switch seamlessly whenever
you
you
can.
need, or start something just and add vector and stay there.
Yep. And all the tools and all the brushes I'm still learning, but I love how you can like tag your favorites and you can put them in your favorite brushes panel. So
Yes.
I like to start things off just with a pencil. The pencil in Fresco is amazing. I feel like it has just like, they've done such a great job with, let me just get a new layer open. You know, the feel of
texture.
it and
Yeah.
the texture. And I love how you can change the flow to like a full flow, or you can go down to like a more like a less opacity flow. So it's always nice to kind of play around with the brushes at first and get loose. So I usually do that. And then whenever I start any sketch, I have to remind myself, don't draw the eye first, do the big picture, start drawing the shapes. So I'm just going to kind of show you guys and lower the opacity here for my reference layer and just show you guys how I kind of get started.
Yes, this is always like such an interesting part because there's a lot of different ways people approach kind of this initial sketch.
Yes.
And I'm always curious to see how detailed people go for that first sketch. So this is really fun that we get to see this. And if you've ever wanted to draw from a reference photo, this is a really good stream to be watching so you can kind of understand how you build your own character design from a reference photo.
Yeah, and it's always nice, like in the beginning, I'll decide, am I going to draw this like exactly like this photo, or am I going to put my own spin on it? And obviously I put my own spin on her.
Yes.
And I'll always, kind of start with these big shapes to make sure I like the silhouette.
Mm-hmm. And that way you can capture any of that movement from the beginning, as opposed to trying to backwards engineer it towards the end.
Yes, 100%. And sometimes, with these more fun drawings, I like to stay loose because I'll end up actually in this one keeping a lot of those initial sketch strokes, because it just creates kind of movement and like interest, and sometimes even mistakes like end up being like the best part of my drawing. So
yes,
yeah. So I usually
think also with digital, you can always have a tendency to refine a little too much. Yes. Because you have that ability to zoom in. Yeah. So keeping that base sketch that's a little more free before you got very into the details is always adds another like layer of interest.
Yeah, 100%. And I tend to overwork my stuff all the time. And I have to ask like my family, is it done? And they're like, it's done. Don't touch it. And I'm like, are you sure? Because maybe I want to go back and add some more. But
yes. Sometimes you need a fresh eye. That's when you need to take a break from it.
It's 100% true. I have to put it away and then come back to it. So here's kind of just the loose sketch. I'm going to actually delete this layer because I have all my layers pre-made. So I'm going to bring this back up. So this was the first kind of structured layer. And then I'll go in just a little bit more, like I mentioned, with like very loose details, just to kind of really just like loosen up my pencil and my hand to decide like, the flow of things. If I try too hard to stay rigid, then things usually don't end up looking as good.
Right. And at this phase, are you, aside from checking in on the proportions, which you mentioned a little bit earlier when you were kind of setting the shapes in, are you also looking at composition at this stage?
I think so. I think, it's kind of natural when I bring in a reference photo to like, for me to put it on the top right. And then I have a lot of that negative space. But at this point, I'm checking for the silhouette to see if I like the proportions, like you mentioned. And then I'm thinking, what do I want to do with this background? Like kind of just getting to know her. And then I'm always going to put some kind of crazy, wacky background in it because I want to bring her into a different environment, unless I absolutely love what she's already got going on. But, it's a pretty basic background she's in. It's like a photo shoot situation. I'm not sure if that's like a van in the back or what, but this one is definitely going to be, more way out there. And so
we're going to bring her into your world.
Yeah, we're going to bring her into a different world.
For those in the chat, if you have any questions for Melissa, drop them in the chat. We'll get them answered as she's working here. So don't be shy. Bring your questions about Adobe Fresco, about character design to the chat. We're happy to answer those. Okay, what are we up to now, Melissa?
So now I'm kind of going back in and starting to, lay down a little more detail. I'm using my previous reference sketch just to guide me while I'm live, but this is where I'll start putting her eyes in and, placing them, making sure I like her expression. And, if it's like moody, I want to make sure that I have the exact right location of her eyes and the light hitting it. I want to, figure out like, do I like this nose? Do I need to change it? And however this, beautiful person is, hopefully they never would take offense to me drawing and changing anything up. Because a lot of times I do. I'll change body proportions. I'll change hair, eye color, stuff like that. So it's usually just for me more of like an inspiration and like a proportion check, because I tend to be extremely stylized when I draw. It's much harder for me to do like realistic stuff.
Right. So that's why that reference photo comes in handy to kind of get a natural pose as opposed to like what in your mind you think the pose is.
Exactly.
Which might look a little bit stiff or something.
Right.
We have a great question here from Elizabeth Slim. Do you start with blue for a particular reason? I thought the same thing early on, and then I got sucked into the drawing process. But yeah, why are we starting here with blue?
That's actually a great question. So thank you, Elizabeth. I start with blue because when I was young, going to art lessons, I was taught to use a blue pencil with a blue pencil. So it reminds me of like just that kind of natural state of drawing. And this particular blue is just the hue that I remember those like soft HBs being in. And I know like, I think like architects tend to use blue. And I've actually heard another artist on here on Adobe Live that he did the same thing. And so it just kind of feels like less of a commitment, also more fun than just drawing in like gray or black for me, especially because I never know where I'm going to go with the color.
Yeah,
so great
that's
question.
Amazing. I'm so glad that you're kind of bringing in that traditional element of drawing into this digital space. I think that pencil, I've used it before, is the non-photo blue. I think is the pencil that you're referring to. It has it's a similar color to this, so I think it is. So if anyone wants to check it out, the non-photo blue pencil available in many art stores.
Yes.
It's really cool because allegedly it doesn't like scan in on some scanners, and that's why it's like used sometimes.
Yep. It's kind of like not seeing the green screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, I wonder if by using this blue, you kind of get into that sketching mentality. So you don't start adding too many fine details, right? Because if you're working 100%. With the black or, whatever your go-to color is, you might start just perfecting a little too soon.
Exactly. It's a definite reminder But I ended up, interestingly enough, I ended up keeping her blue for this. So, moving to like another phase of this whole thing, I definitely started to like really like this blue color, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just leave it on here.
Maybe we just keep going with it.
Yes. Yeah. So at this different layer, I'm just gonna see which ones I need to keep up.
I love seeing how we're slowly going from like abstract shapes to figure to face. It's all coming together already.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to like allow yourself that time to, move through the drawing. I'm just trying to find this one particular layer because I want to erase this. There it is.
Nice.
Actually.
So now you start to erase from the original sketch to kind of just refine it as opposed to
sometimes
adding?
Yeah, sometimes. I wasn't intentionally going to do that during this stream, but I think I've drawn over one of my layers, so I was just trying to get rid of this little crosshatch here.
Undo.
Yeah, and try and find it. There we go. I found it. Yeah, so sometimes I'll erase. If it's like a really refined piece, then I definitely, don't want to see those guided lines that I'm drawing. But if it's something that's a little more like this, then, in the end, she's like all smudged around and smudged over. So those lines end up like kind of disappearing.
Right.
So like as I add more layers here, this is where I start to smudge things. So this pixel pencil, it's so amazing because you can add, that grittiness of the pencil, and it will, show up, as you can see here. And then if you go back to the smudge tool, and I usually have a favorite here, I use the soft round opacity smudging tool. And then you can, obviously bring the strength up and bring the size up. It just blends so nicely.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's like one of my favorite things. Mm-hmm.
That's like a pastel pencil right there.
It is, right? It's a lot like pastel. Like I can imagine just like rubbing it with my finger. Fresco does such a great job with textures of their tools. And, it just allows you to like really build upon what you're drawing, and in a very forgiving way. I mean, we all have undo, but like when you use pixel brushes and you're smudging stuff together, especially if I was to like merge all of these layers, it would, pick up everything. So I really like that ability. And smudging in Photoshop is so different than smudging in Fresco.
Yes, well, because you have that kind of like tactile relationship with the iPad, right?
Yeah.
That makes it feel a lot more traditional than it would on like a regular desktop screen.
Yep.
Why do you think you choose to kind of add in the pencil and then smudge it, as opposed to, let's say, going in with like a chunkier brush or an airbrush kind of tool? What do you think about the pencil and then the smudging? Why do you think that's a process that you love?
I think it's because lately I've noticed that I really enjoy showing some noise and texture through my drawings. And if I'm going straight to the airbrush, I'm not necessarily going to have both worlds. So
right.
I can decide, where I want to leave it with some noise and some texture versus, smudging away the parts that, I think should be a little bit softer. So I kind of like, for this particular drawing, I kind of like just having the option to do both.
You have a little more control as to where you keep that like very defined texture versus the airbrush texture. If you were to go in with one of those pixel airbrush brushes, it would be very smooth and slick throughout the entire piece. I love that. Yeah, if you're an artist experimenting with Fresco, keep that in mind. You have so many tools at your disposal. You can use the smudge tool to kind of take away some of that texture, but still keep it in the little places where you want to make sure that detail is still right there. That's a really handy trick from Melissa.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've been using Fresco for about probably 7 months now, maybe a little bit longer. And there's just so many little things. And I know I still have a lot to learn, but there's just so many little things that I really like about it. I like the option that, you can always see your colors that you previously used right away. And, you can graduate those colors with the sliders. So you have your hue, your saturation, your brightness there. It's all available, and your color wheel too. And if you don't want to use those things, you can just hide them. So I think it's really just such a great combination, like a marriage of Photoshop and Illustrator, really. I mean, you're not going to have all the capabilities of either of those, but for a drawing program, it's perfect for me. I love it.
Exactly. I really love that it's very intuitive compared to something like Photoshop, right? Photoshop is way more robust because you can do so much more with it.
Right.
But with Fresco, if you're trying to draw or illustrate, it's going to give you all the tools you need to accomplish that right there on your iPad, which is so handy.
Yeah.
We have another amazing question here from Elizabeth. Elizabeth coming in with the great questions. How long does the sketch phase usually take for you?
It depends. If I'm sitting down and I'm just going to focus for several hours, probably I would say it depends, if I really know where I'm going to go with it, but I would say anywhere from an hour to 2 hours.
And what about an entire piece, let's say? I mean, this is a big question because I know you can work a piece forever. So
yeah. If I'm good and leave it alone and don't go back to it, a piece like this particular piece probably took me, I want to say maybe 8 hours.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Guess, yeah.
And I'm assuming it's not 8 hours straight.
No, no, definitely not 8 hours straight. Sometimes on the weekends, my husband and I will sit around and, he'll get on his laptop, I'll get on my iPad, and, we'll be playing with our fluffy corgi and draw for a few hours. And
that's amazing.
It's my favorite thing. So.
That's the cool thing about adapting your workflow to the iPad and using Adobe Fresco is that then you can kind of casually return to your drawings.
You can.
Which is so cool, as opposed to, carrying around, let's say, traditional materials or having to plug into a desktop kind of setup. Very cool. Oh, we have a question from Alfredo Garcia. So nice to see you, Alfredo. He asks if you teach any courses in Fresco.
Oh, no, but if Adobe will hire me, I will be happy to do that.
There we go, guys. We have to create demand. Thanks for flagging that question, Wade. I totally didn't see it at first. So thank you.
Thank you for asking.
And in a way, this is a little course on Fresco because we're going to be using Fresco throughout the entire stream. Is that right?
That's right.
There you go. So if you stay tuned to this, you'll be able to pick up all of these handy tricks as we're live. So that's cool. If you haven't used Adobe Fresco before, now you'll get a little sneak peek. Melissa, where are we in your sketch process? Talk me through the tools that you're using and the decisions that you're making at this stage.
So at this stage, I'm pretty happy with the color palette and how everything is kind of living together. So I'm more in a refinement of the sketch. Because this sketch is going to live inside the actual drawing, this is where I'll start to bring in more detail. I'll work on the color values and make sure that, I understand what's going to be the darkest dark, what's going to be the lightest light. And then, the big challenge then is bringing in all the color on top of this. So once I'm done here, I'll move to the vector layer. So right now I'm just kind of blocking in where I want some shadows to live, figuring out where I'm going to continue to smudge things or leave it kind of this noisy texture. Mm-hmm. So this phase is usually kind of the end phase of the sketch at this point.
Got it. Okay. So keep on watching to see her kind of refine the sketch. I love seeing this process. It is very traditional feeling, which is so heartwarming, right? The way that you're working is it's additive. And that's it's cool to see it happen in the iPad and seeing how you're adding that shadow. It's honestly mesmerizing to watch.
Oh,
very relaxing. I don't know if anyone else on the stream feels a sense of relaxation here because I feel at peace watching this come together. I think also the blue, right? It's very calming.
Yeah.
which is nice. We have
Nice.
a question here from Anthony Jackson.
Okay.
Anthony asks, where do you get your inspiration from?
Well, thanks for asking that, Anthony. Sometimes it just comes to me like I look at Behance all the time. So, and for my job, I'm a creative director. So I'm always, on there looking for inspiration for my designers and for client projects and stuff like that. So a lot of my inspiration comes from Behance. And I'll usually take a look at the fashion portfolio projects. It's like I'm being inspired by other artists. I'm being inspired by this amazing community on Behance. Adobe stock has some really great photos. So usually if it's something that I'm going to pull in, and use as a reference, that's where a lot of my inspiration will come from. And then sometimes if I'm not feeling inspired, I'm a big nature person. So I'll like go on a walk and I'll just allow myself to be present in the moment and look around, and something will inevitably inspire me, whether it's like the light hitting a plant in a certain way and just seeing like that maybe gradient light hitting it through different colors. So I try to make sure I am always in nature and having some organic inspiration as well. But a lot of things can inspire me. Makeup inspires me, clothes, other artists inspire me all the time at my job. So it's kind of, I'm in a very lucky spot after 20 years of being in the corporate world and doing marketing and all of that. And now landing in this job I'm in now at Designity as a creative director. I'm immersed in art all day, and it's like a dream come true. So lots of inspiration.
I love hearing that. I feel like there's
Yes.
probably a lot of people either on the stream or watching the replay right now that probably are in similar positions where they were in corporate jobs because, it's a good job and that's
Right.
amazing. But they maybe want to stay connected with their creative side. And we're doing that on this stream. And you're also living proof that you can kind of make it all work for yourself. How did you end up kind of finding a more creative role within kind of your corporate job or your day job?
So I went to the Art Institute of Houston when I was, in college, and I actually went there for video animation. I wanted to design video game characters and do video games. And I live in Houston. And so in order for that to happen, I would have had to move somewhere else. So it was pretty dry out here. I did some freelance stuff on the side. And I honestly just thought, like, is this ever going to happen for me? And it was, frustrating because I was like, okay, I'm going to keep pushing. I did a lot of like art shows and, I sold my art online. I did like Etsy and lots of other like Society 6, stuff like that. And then during COVID is actually when I actually got breast cancer. So I was really in a very dark place and really rethinking, like, what do I want to do for my life? And knowing I would come out of it on the other side, because I didn't give myself that choice. I was like, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to do something for me and do something artistic. And I just so happened to find Designity, which covers, it's not an agency, but it's like a design firm, fully remote, creative community. And it covers anything you can think of design related. And so I thought, gosh, this would be great. I could get into animation again. I could get into video production. I could, do illustration and mentor young creatives that, I wish I had more mentorship when I was young and like they're in college and stuff like that. So I just applied and manifested it as best as I could. And it happened for me. And it's been just so rewarding. And then I was on Behance, actively on Behance, just like posting every day. And I was like watching y'all's live streams on Adobe. And I told my husband, I said, they're going to reach out to me. You just watch. And you guys did, literally 2 weeks later. And
Amazing.
I was like, oh my God. I was like crying. I was like, this is a dream come true. Because, when you're young, everyone's like, you can't be an artist. You'll never make money. How are you going to do that? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. here I am.
Yes, it's proof that creative careers are totally possible. There's so many different directions to take them.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that the pandemic kind of inspired you to reconnect with
Yes.
your original, dream and make it come to life in like this way that you probably never even imagined originally, when you first went to college. So I think that's so inspiring and heartwarming, literally. And I think like, this is a great message for those watching who also want to have a creative career and are watching and picking up tips and learning. Like if you kind of throw yourself into a creative community and if you, put yourself out there, because that's a lot of it, right? It's like, you applied to that job, you went live on Behance, you use Behance all the time. Things can happen for you too. So I love that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's really true. Like, people would tell me, don't give up. And I'm like, ugh. Frustrated, you get frustrated.
It's frustrating. It can be really frustrating to pursue your dreams is the reality.
It really can. But if you do, I mean, it can come true. I mean, it really can. So,
well, why don't you give us an update as to what we're doing here in Adobe Fresco? If you're just tuning in, we're in Adobe Fresco with Melissa Showers. She's showing us her character design process. Where are we at with it?
Okay, so now I'm pretty happy with the sketching and the blending at this point for this kind of underpainting, you even call it underlayer. So this is where I decide like, okay, what kind of colors am I gonna bring in? And the color part usually takes a lot of time. It's like trying on 100 different pairs of jeans. I'm like,
I know.
It's definitely gonna take a long time. So here is where the color comes in. And let me just, okay. So first, let me hide that one and show this one.
Yeah, I'm curious how you go about selecting it. I know that there's endless possibilities, especially when you're working digitally. Like you have every possible color at your disposal, and it can be very overwhelming to pick these color palettes. So I'm curious how you test these out and kind of find what works for you.
Yeah. Okay. So this one, I love tertiary colors. So orange and blue are like my go-to. So I'm just going to hide her for a second. And so the underlayer of the clothing, you can see she's pretty see-through because we did the blue sketching. And so I never really filled her in completely with anything. So I went under her and I started with this orange t-shirt and I was like thinking about, the green and, keeping the hat really loose in the sketch. And then Adobe Fresco has these amazing shapes that they have in their program. So if you go to your panel on the left, this is my favorite one, actually. There's a whole bunch of interesting shapes that you can choose from. So
cool.
Yeah.
I've never explored this. I'm so excited that you're showing this to us.
It's great because if you really want to just kind of mix it up and see what Fresco has to offer, it really is so cool. So it'll give you this kind of like low opacity, kind of, I guess, option for you to take a look to see if it's something you want to lay down. So if you go and click on everything, it'll show up that way. And then there's a comics one. So you have all of these different options like talk bubbles.
Cool, very cool.
Yeah, really cool stuff. So I've used a lot of these and you may not even know that I used them just because I've morphed them into other things. But for this particular one, I kept with that kind of a splash, but they do have like flowers, and then you can bring in your own library too.
Oh, cool. So flexible.
Yeah, there's like a lot of things you can bring in from like other drawings, just different patterns and shapes. So I stuck with the splash right here. So when you go to choose your shape, you're going to go down to the fill at the very bottom. Oops, let me add a layer. Let me unhide it. Oh,
that is so neat. I bet that there's so many cool ways to use that feature. And it really probably helps you. Sometimes you're trying to draw that perfect circle and it's like impossible. Here you have a quick shortcut,
Yeah, it is true. Yeah, it's so true about that. And then when you go to fill it, it'll ask you, do you want to fill it in a vector or pixel? So nice. I'll do a vector for this one, and whatever color you have highlighted, it will automatically, change
drop
that color.
That in.
But you can go back and change it. So And then obviously this is separate. So you would have to make sure and, go through and do all of your different fills. But I'll usually just like take a shape and then I'll position it in a way that I think, could be really cool in the background. So I'm going to just hit done for that. I'm going to delete that layer because that's not what I landed on. And I'm going to open this back up. So let me unlock this layer. So this layer group is the background, and
yeah, you use a lot of different shapes here to kind of create some interest.
Yeah. So when you bring the shapes in, there's also this really great option to change the layer properties and the blend modes. So this is like one of my favorite things to do. So I'll always go through every single one and just see what changes between the color and the shape, and how it kind of just changes the piece. So you have a color burn, linear burn, and these are all basically based on the color paint bucket that you choose for your shape, but also the background color. And it's gonna change like the whole look of everything. So some of them work and some of them don't.
That's such a quick way to kind of start exploring with color, as opposed to kind of manually refilling or even changing layers just to see how different colors play together. This is a really fast way to just like start exploring and testing some things out that maybe you didn't even think of. That's such a cool trick.
Exactly. And I love how it adds this like kind of neon element. So it's very cool. So I landed on linear light for that one. And then there's one more shape here at the bottom. I wanted to tie in the green in her hat to like kind of like just a bottom, a bottom shape here. So I kept that in normal mode. So it stayed to be, the same green as the other. And then if I go outside of this layer group, so here's where I'm like, okay, now the real fun begins, because I get to bring in my vector layers and start drawing. So everything else has been in pixel. And here is where I'll start overlaying the actual drawing of, her face and cross hatching and all that stuff. So I have a special vector pen that I love, and I put it in my favorites. It's up here.
Tell us everything. I know everyone in the chat is going to be very curious about all the different brushes. So give us a deep dive here on this brush.
Okay. So the taper brush is, what I like about the taper brush is you can push, let me add a layer. You can push pretty hard and get a really fat line. I'm going to change the color to a darker color so you can see. So that's if I push pretty hard. And then if I go lighter, it's still going to give me that like really nice taper at the top and the bottom of the line. You can do straight lines, but you can also do it really straight lines. So if I click and hold, it straightens it out for you. But you're always going to have the shape of this brush. So it just depends on if you like that shape, because there's also some new manga brushes. I think the G pen was one of them. So that's not going to have that tapered edge. And then for other brushes, for vector, there's all kinds, like it's almost like a calligraphy style brush.
Yes. And where did you get most of these brushes? Are they the built-in brushes?
These are built-in. Manga was new with the update. And I just started trying it the other day. But I'm still going to go back to my favorite, but there's a ton of brushes.
There's so much to experiment with. Yeah. I think that's like one of the underrated, like cool things about Fresco is you get so many brush options and many brush updates that come just free with your Fresco app. And you can really experiment with your brushes and your style right there. And you can always download so many more using those Kyle T. Webster brushes. If you haven't checked those out, you guys, be sure to check them out. They come free with Fresco, and you can start getting crazy with your brushes and download those manga brushes if you haven't already, because that seems like a really fun way to play with your work. And what are you doing here? Are we going back to Pixel?
Well, I'm going to show you really quick, just because you brought up Kyle T. Webster. So I have a few of his that I believe I downloaded, some watercolor ones, but maybe it's, oh wait, here, I think it's here.
Yes, the
It could
live
be
brushes.
some of these, yeah. But he's got a great set of brushes. You can download, like you were mentioning. But yeah, so I'll go back to vector now. One other thing I wanted to mention about these vector brushes and any of the brushes here in Fresco is you have this smoothing capability. So if you turn smoothing all the way up, it's going to guide you in that line and make it smooth. It actually slows it down a bit. So I can do like, let's say I brought the smoothing all the way down. So you can see like it's definitely going to have more like vector points, right?
Right.
So I like to mess around with the smoothing as well.
It's a little more jittery. It's like your natural hand versus the smoothing kind of makes you a pro calligrapher almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Gives you a little hand. Okay, that's amazing. If you haven't tried the smoothing tool, you have to try it. Is that your hand or using a little smoothing help? I'm just curious.
This is actually, I'm going to keep it about 40 here. I'm going to start over these eyebrows, but if you're doing a long line, like it's a good guide to help. But if you like to draw fast, it can kind of make the line a little bit straighter. So you just kind of have to like play with how it feels.
Yeah, get used to your own kind of hand and see how it mixes with the smoothing tool. That makes sense.
Yeah. Like I'll definitely use the smoothing here because I want it to be like more of a circle.
Right. Yes, look at that. That looks great.
Thank you.
With a little help from our smoothing friends.
Yes.
But why not help yourself, right? If you're working digitally and you have access to all these tools, I'm all about it. I think, it's just going to speed up your process and speed up your work.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And it's definitely, a trial and error, like especially with eyes, right? Because you have to make sure that you're getting the right expression that you want, and you don't want it to look like angry or sad unless that's what you're going for. So it usually takes like a few tries for me to get the lines right.
Yes, I always find eyelashes very tricky.
Yeah, with the vector, it's pretty simple. I mean, especially if you are really, wanting them to be straight, whereas here they're a little more curly. So beautiful. Thank you. Just start like, penciling in or vectoring in all of her eyebrows.
And just start adding in that little bit of detail. Yep. I have a little question for you. Is there a reason why you prefer to use, let's say, this dark blue as opposed to a black?
I think that black is good for like small areas. Well, it depends. It depends on your color palette. But like for her, I think it would be a little too harsh if I went all the way black.
Yeah.
I'll probably use a little bit of black in some of it for like the deepest shadows. But one of my art teachers, I was taking art lessons before the pandemic, and he really taught me a lot about color values and how your widest white isn't always white, and your darkest dark isn't always black. So he just kind of always, tried to get me to understand color value and not look at it as a color necessarily, but more as like a gradation and a shade of a particular color. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that it's helping this piece feel a little bit more cohesive as opposed to like a stark black that might kind of clash a little bit with that beautiful blue like underpainting that you essentially have. You wouldn't want to disturb that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it works. There's a lot of different like shades of blue that I did in here, like navies and stuff like that. And so, I'm using the darker colors there, and then I'll go to like a lighter navy here to start bringing in some shading. And I usually don't do like cross hatching like this or just hatching, but I wanted to just kind of try something different and see how it worked with this piece. And I also like love drawing lines. It's like very satisfying for me, and they put me to sleep.
Yes, it's very soothing.
Yeah, it's very soothing. If a long day at work and I just want to kind of go into my iPad and never come out.
Exactly.
Yeah, it can be really relaxing. So
I mean, it's important to find a process that you really like. So if drawing lines gives you like the process itself feels really good, then it's like you're going to create way more work, you know, if you find that process that naturally you don't want to pull away from.
Right, exactly.
All right, you guys in the chat, let me know if you have any questions for Melissa. We're here where she's showing us her character design process in Adobe Fresco for the iPad. So if you have any questions for Melissa, bring them, drop them in the chat. And if you're watching on YouTube and you keep dropping questions in the chat and we're not reading them, it's because you need to come over to Behance, behance.net/Adobe Live. Come on over, join us on Behance, join the chat here. We have an amazing creative community, and then you'll get your answers. You'll get your questions answered. Your answers answered. Come on over. Don't be shy. We're hanging out here with Melissa as she's showing us her process, and you know, we're all learning something. So come on over. I love this hair, Melissa. It's so like dynamic. It has movement. Tell me about how you create this for those who maybe have a hard time or struggle with hair, because I know that can be a challenging thing.
Yeah, hair is probably one of my most favorite things to draw. And I think, you know, using the reference photo and seeing the movement in her hair, and it's like windy and she's got this great thick hair, really just inspired me to just make sure I involved that type of movement when I started drawing her hair. So I'm going to go back into my layer here, and I'm basically just figuring out, you know, what different shades I want to do in this kind of underpainting of the vector, because things get a little bit more wild as we go on into the painting further. And there's some really like neon colors going on and different layer properties for the filters and stuff. But here's kind of where I start the foundation. And hair is just, you know, I used to have super long hair, like giant hair. And then I went through cancer and I lost my hair. And then now I have like this shaved side, but my hair's starting to grow back.
Yes, gorgeous.
Yes, thank you. So I think it's because I'm so familiar with my own hair that I've always like been drawn to drawing it. But what I like to do is just kind of pick some spots that I know are going to eventually be highlighted as well. So like for this portion where it's like under her cap and it's like kind of bunchy and tucked in, I know that there's going to be some curvature to her hair, and I'm going to want to highlight that. So these are like the low lights, if you will. And then we'll go back and we'll do some highlights to bring in the depth and make it look a little more 3D, even though this is 2D.
Beautiful. That's a really great way to think about it. I think sometimes hair can be intimidating because there's so much detail, but also no detail at the same time, right? Because you're trying to capture like the mass of it all.
Right.
And so thinking about the curves and the low lights and the highlights is a really good way to kind of break it down so it doesn't seem so intimidating, and you don't create kind of this like helmet hair if that's not if that's not what you're going for. Okay.
Right.
If that's what you want, then that's what you want.
Right.
But yeah, it can be really intimidating. So that's a really good way to look at it. And I also noticed that you're adding a lot of different like weight to each stroke to kind of help you create the shape of the hair overall. It comes very naturally to you, but that's another really important part of drawing hair. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make the stroke thick if I really want it to be like the star of that section of her hair, right? And it's maybe got a more definitive flow throughout the piece. And then this is a very, you know, right here is like extremely thick because that's going to be a big part of the shadow. So yeah, I'm just kind of like marking, you know, where I want highlights to live and how I want it to all flow together. You know, we all get those flyaway hairs in the wind. So I'm making sure to put some of those in to kind of, you know, match this reference photo a little bit. And then, you know, you can still see some of this sketch in the background here, which I like because it just feels like really organic.
Yeah.
So you've got, you know, this great mix of like vector and pixel brushes.
Yeah, I think that's like a really handy thing about Fresco is that you can switch between pixel brushes and vector brushes,
Hmm.
and you don't have to exclusively work within one. You can work like Melissa here and have some pixel layers and then some vector layers to kind of help yourself differentiate and try different tools and see what works better in your process.
Yes, for sure. And so I just, you know, made visible another layer that I did a little more detail on here. So you can see where I'm going in between each stroke with that highlight. So I'm just like bringing it to life in a lot of these different spots. And one thing I learned a long time ago is if you can keep a consistent area, like, I'm just going to circle this, but all of these highlights are going to hit in the same spot. So if you keep it consistent across in a line, then it makes more sense visually, and your brain connects to it looking a little more real, even though this is a completely stylized piece. So
Right, right. It's just something that your eye is like familiar with because
yes,
we're just basically tricking the eye into understanding the shape of the hair.
yep,
So that's a really cool way to look at it. And I think, yeah, highlights and shadows. I remember learning in art school that every shadow has a little bit of a highlight, and that kind of helps you understand later when you're drawing where to lay that down, and you can see it just so evidently right here how you're putting this together. Every
thank
shadow
you.
kind of has a little highlight there to kind of make it pop a little bit
Yes,
more.
yes, definitely does. And so now I am going to delete that layer, go back out of this vector group. So here's where it starts to get, wild. So here's where I decided I'm going to really go for it. And I'm going to add a whole bunch of colors. I'm going to play around with different layer properties. And so if we go into this layer, I'm going to start hiding things, but I'm going to start showing some things too. So here's her nose ring, which we'll take off for now. And then this layer, let me zoom back out, is, if you can see, a little bit of an extra oomph of neon. So it goes away, it comes back. And this is another place where I played with the blend mode. So if I was to switch it from saturation to divide, then I would get much more of a brighter look to that kind of almost like a tie-dyed effect on her t-shirt, right? If I change it to exclusion, then you can actually see this is actually where I drew things. So it may look messy here, but if I go back to saturation, it's only going to pick up certain things because all the colors involved have everything to do with what it picks up. So if I go to color, that's the color I actually used. And if I was to go to overlay, then it's going to give another effect. So that's the thing I love about Fresco is you can really change your art without changing your art. You can test and see things that actually work and don't work for, maybe today I would choose this and then next year I would choose something else. So
Definitely. It gives it like that experimental, it's like an experimental phase where you can color and kind of within your process go into the blending modes and see, oh, I wonder if I can experiment a color I hadn't thought of, right? If you chose that other layer that was like a really neon pink, like maybe you wouldn't have personally picked that.
right,
But then when you
right.
see it as an option, you think, hey, maybe I can work with this. Maybe this brings like a
Yep,
different element, it sparks something different. So I
yep.
think playing with those blending modes is a really, really like fun technique to incorporate into your work. Let me know in the chat if you've used the blending modes before in your work just to see and experiment. And if you have a favorite brush in Adobe Fresco, why don't you drop that in the chat? That way we all get to see the different brushes that everyone's using, maybe get inspired to select a different brush. I love the pencil brush, which I know you shared.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love a monoline brush. I don't know why. It's just sometimes it's kind of my safe space. So let us
Mm-hmm.
know in the chat your favorite brushes. We are seeing Melissa's right here, right now, but let us know. Okay, Melissa, where are we going now? What stage of this are we in? And just like give us a little bit more context.
Okay, so we're now, we did the blocking of the darker vector outlines of everything, and then now it's like party mode. So I'm going to show you each of these layers I'm going to hide, and then I'm going to show you how I built upon each layer. So let me hide this one, and then I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you how I started this. So if you notice, like there's orange and there's light blue, and then there's like some in-between blues. And what I really wanted to do was pick up that orange background and show it as like highlighting effect. So I'm going to hide this and I'm going to start on this layer, and I'm basically going to just graduate every shadow like into a lighter color until I get to that last highlight. So, you know, when you're doing highlights and lowlights, if you're doing something super realistic, it's important to know where your light source is. Sometimes, like in this case, like I'm like, oh, it's fine, I'll just put it wherever I want. So it just depends on like the look that you're going for. In this case, it doesn't have to be particularly so perfect, but I just decided to just have fun and like see how everything turned out. And I ended up really liking this like idea of playing with all these different colors for shadows and highlights instead of just like your typical monotone colors.
Right. Yeah. That's the cool thing when you're working in like a more stylized style or technique, is that you can kind of play with where those light sources are. You don't have to stick to realism.
Right.
So it can give you something more loose, more experimental, and just a little bit more playful too.
Yeah.
And there's value in that. I feel like sometimes realist art is kind of perceived as the best, the creme de la creme, but you can also have amazing stylized art. And here is, I think you're a really good example of mixing the two, because before we were working very realistic in the underpainting, and now we have completely stylized it and played with it, and it's a lot more playful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely makes things more fun. And whenever I'm doing something realistic, I have to really pay attention until like a certain phase. And you'll see that in day 2 tomorrow, I'm doing something a little more realistic, and the process is different. But it's still fun. It's just, it takes a little more longer to get to the fun. Whereas this is like, oh, this whole thing is fun. So it's great.
I guess this stylized work can be a little bit more relaxed, as opposed to meticulous, which is what realist. And so they both have their own kind of purpose and their own value too.
Oh yes, 100%.
Beautiful. Oh, now we're bringing in, is this blue, would you say is a highlight, or is this still okay? So
this is like the beginning of the real brighter highlights. And I played around with like, you know, different blues and, you know, how bright do I want this to be? And, you know, thought about, am I going to bring in any white? And maybe at the very end I will, but for now I'm just kind of seeing how they look on top of each other. And it really just kind of gives it like a more 3D effect.
I agree. Yeah. I think by adding all the different kind of layers of color, right? Because where it's like a gradient, it does help us understand the volume of what we're looking at a little bit better. Like now her eyebrows look so bushy and like, not spiky, but like upward, you know?
Yes.
They have that movement that's way more defined than you can even see on the right.
Yep. Yeah, she used some eyebrow gel today. So she's
exactly. She's going for soap brows.
Yes. So now I'm going to bring in that orange, and it just kind of takes it to another level. There's an artist that I love. Her name is Martine Johanna. I don't know if anyone's heard of her, but she uses Prismacolors, and she does this effect with Prismas where she's bringing in all different colors of light. And it's so moody. And I always wanted to do that. And I actually tried doing it with acrylics at first, which was like a horrible idea because they dry so fast. And I'm definitely a better drawer than I am a painter. Painting is so much harder for me.
I feel that.
Yeah, it's just a whole nother world. So it was nice to be able to like play around with doing this technique in digital. So
yeah, I think that's the really cool thing about like an app like Fresco, is you can kind of try a new technique and see how you like it before, let's say, trying it traditionally, because you don't have the material or you don't have the like skill set for painting, right? Like if that part is a challenge, you can still accomplish the same effect with a digital tool like Adobe Fresco here on the iPad.
Exactly. I mean, it's just so easy, and you don't need to like get all your tools out and make a huge mess. And sometimes that discourages you from even doing anything, right? Because you're just you're tired.
And
you don't
I
want to deal
think
with
it's
it.
cool too that you can test it here, and then if you really want to, you could go back to traditional, and kind of, now that you have a little bit more understanding of how you would go about it, kind of both traditional and digital can influence each other and each other's process. They don't have to be like black and white separate entities. And I think that's a really cool way to approach art making, you know, and your process.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like, you know, when you put the paint on the canvas, there's no control Z. Like you're committing, or you're waiting till it dries and then you're building upon it. I can tell you, I've probably like 20 paintings that started as something completely different and then have been like 5 different things. So it's nice to have that kind of a little more control when you're doing digital art.
Yes, and I've seen now that a lot of different artists kind of will take their digital drawings and paint like digital sketches, and then reproduce them traditionally if they love them, you know, if they commit to the sketch as just like another tool in their tool set for their creative practice.
Yeah, I have probably 5 of my pieces that are on Behance that I printed on canvas hanging up in my home. And Beautiful. It's just like, oh, it's so inspiring every day. I'm just like, this is great. I love it.
Yes, you can definitely, you know, when I feel like whenever I see a digital piece of mine or something I created digitally, even if it's not in Fresco, let's say, and I see it printed out, I'm just so satisfied. I'm just like, to be able to make it tangible once again. It's like the circle of life of a digital piece or something.
I agree 100%.
Oh, we have a wonderful question here from Anthony Jackson. Where did you first fall in love with drawing? I know you kind of briefly touched on this in the beginning, but
so thanks for asking, Anthony. I was super young, and gosh, I mean, I think maybe like 3 is when my mom said that I started drawing, but my dad like brought home, like, I'm 41, so no one probably remembers this paper, but it used to be attached with the little dots. Yeah, exactly. You have to pull it apart, and that's what would be fed into a printer. So he would bring home like his extras, and there would be like stuff on it, and I was just like sit at the kitchen table and just start drawing. And I was such a girly girl. I would draw women, I would draw shoes, I would draw fashion, and I just kind of never stopped. And my parents always encouraged me to keep going. And they, you know, did art lessons for me. They paid for my art college. They were always like just encouraging me to never give up. And I feel like with that kind of support, and being told and reinforced like that I am good at a young age, it helped me to just kind of keep going. And I just kind of always, I don't know, I just feel like I always knew that's what I wanted to do, which is very lucky, because I know it's hard for a lot of people to figure out what they want to do. And I always just felt really lucky that this was something I wanted to at least try for.
That's so nice that you had like that encouraging atmosphere. I feel like everyone starts out as an artist. I genuinely believe that. And then over time, you kind of either steer into it or steer away from it, and away from that like creative spark. And so it's beautiful to see when like a little bit, or not a little bit, but a lot of support can actually pay off, and you can kind of cultivate that into an entire career.
It really is. I mean, I just feel like so lucky. And both of my boys are very artistic, and I, you know, try and do that with them too. And I always, you know, encourage them and just let them know, like, you can have an art dream and make it happen. It doesn't have to be the way it used to be, where starving artists and all that. There's like so many jobs out there that you can break into, and it may not be exactly what you want to do at first, but it can pave the way. And that's how you know, learn, and you know, you grow, and you just have to keep pushing forward and make sure that you never give up.
I think a creative career is just as viable as any other career. I mean, every career comes with risks, right? And so it's just as risky as anything else, especially now that there are so many different ways to kind of like manifest a creative career.
Yes.
And Yes, and I said manifest with a emphasis because I know you were mentioning
Yes.
manifesting this live stream for anyone who missed that. So yes, you can make it happen for yourself. There's so many ways to kind of be creative, especially now in this digital age. And I think this stream itself is proof of that, right? We have so many
Yes.
amazing Adobe Lives. This one that you're watching right here, the one prior, the one after. There's so many artists who are just coming on here and showing us their process, and it's just proof that you can kind of have these creative skills and make a career out of it.
Yeah, and Adobe is, given a huge community to so many people, and it's been around for so long. So, any age, I feel like anyone that has, even that works in the corporate world, right? Because they have Adobe Acrobat, knows Adobe.
Yes,
And,
yes.
with Behance, facilitating like a positive environment for all kinds of creatives. And, sometimes I'll get an email, oh, your piece was featured on Fresco. And I'm just like jumping for joy because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Like, thank you so much for doing that, right? Because I'm just out here trying to share my work, hoping it inspires somebody. So it's a great platform that you guys have offered to so many different artists.
Yes, we have an amazing community here. Shout out to everyone in the chat who's joining us today. If you're watching from YouTube, join us on Behance. Like Melissa was just mentioning, Behance is amazing for so many reasons. Come join us on Behance. That way you can join our chat. You can, talk to us while Melissa's showing us her process here. So come on over. We have a question here from Corey Barker. Do you ever add paint layers to your pieces after you print them?
Yes, I have actually. Sometimes it depends on the piece, but if something is looking a little too digital, and I know that might sound weird to somebody that's never printed digital, but if it doesn't feel like organic enough, I will actually go back, and I have one right next to me over here that I've added like texture to or some paint to. And it's usually something that matches the strokes that are in the background anyways, but it just gives it a different layer of, texture and feel so that it feels a little more organic. So great
Yes,
question.
that's an amazing question. And I think it just goes to show that like more and more we can blend those the line
Mediums.
between between traditional and digital, and you can start digitally, finish traditionally, or even vice versa.
Yeah.
So try out Adobe Fresco if you haven't already. We're here watching Melissa work on the iPad. It's got a lot of capabilities. And if you have questions for Melissa about her process on Fresco, bring them to us.
Yes. Happy to answer.
Yes. Okay. We have another question here from Deep D Krishna. Who are your biggest artistic influences? This can be a big question, but
biggest influences. Well, like I mentioned earlier, Martine Johanna, she's an amazing artist. Her subjects are primarily women as well. So I would have to say her. And then let's see.
There's probably so many out there. It's like whenever this question is intense because it like kind of puts you on the spot here. Yeah. So if you think of them while we're working, or if you have one now, let us know. But
awesome. Yeah, I think she's the first that comes to mind. And then honestly, like so many of my designers that I work with at my job are huge inspiration. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like illustration inspiration. It can just be graphic design or video animation or stuff like that. And it's just, I just love seeing what people come up with and create, because everyone's got such a different, style and perspective and experience.
Yes. And everyone, like someone's eye can just inspire you, just like even if it's not the exact same medium, just the way that their taste can inspire you through their work. So I think that's a really cool thing to mention, that you don't always have to draw inspiration from people kind of working in your same realm.
Right. Yes. Thank you for that question.
Yes, amazing question. Keep on bringing your questions, guys. We're here, we're working, and we're answering your questions. Melissa, tell us what these little strokes are. You went back to blue, you were in green for a second. Are we on a different blend mode?
Yes, we are. So here is what I was just working on.
Yes.
And then So that was the finished layer of what I was just working on. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer. And now this is where we brought in different layer properties for this particular layer. So linear dodge is what I have going on here. If you were to see it normal, it's green. So I'm again bringing in that green. Let me just close this stuff out. Bringing in that green from her hat and from the bottom, portion of the drawing with that shape, because I just wanted to kind of play around with those layer properties and see what would happen. So if we were to go back through, that's just, showing you what it looks like, darkened, multiplied. We'll give it a different effect. Color burn, darker, lighten, screen. And I was going in between color dodge and linear dodge. So what do you guys think? Because color dodge is a little more fluorescent and bright. Linear dodge picks up everything a little bit more and it adds a little bit more detail. So I was having a hard time right before this live. I was like, oh my gosh, which one do I want to choose? But I landed on linear dodge, but I'm curious if anyone else has an opinion.
I'll see if what the chat says, guys. If you guys want to chime in, let us know which one you prefer. In the meantime, while we wait for those comments to come in, I personally think I prefer linear dodge. I think the strokes come in a little bit stronger and add kind of like a neon highlight. As opposed to the other one, I think just made it a little bit darker overall, right? Because it like made more shadows. Which it's still cool, but I think the linear dodge has a more like wow factor.
It does.
Right, to her hair, like brings just like another element that I didn't anticipate. So that's my personal take. We'll see what the chat says, but I'll let you know.
Well, I agree with your personal take. So we'll keep it there for now. And so this is where, let's say I was to drop in a different color. So I was working in this green. So if anywhere you put it on here is going to change, right? So it's more yellow on that side. It's a little more green up here. It's more yellow here. And then if I put it on her face, so it's really cool how it's unexpected, like when you change the layer property, and it's kind of exciting way to work because you kind of just play around and see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, because it's being affected by the layers underneath, right?
Yep, that's right. And
so, that explains why it's not like the same color across the board. It's happened to me before where I forget and then I go draw somewhere else and then I'm like, why is it different?
Yep. Yeah.
It's the blending mode.
It's the blending mode. And, it's also like has an opacity element. So you can see the line underneath it, which is cool too. So if I change
to the chat, sorry. According to the chat, everyone likes the linear dodge. So we were all on the same page. Yes.
That's great.
Just letting you know.
That's awesome. Thanks for chiming in, everybody. Yes. Yeah. It's, I don't know. Sometimes I go back and forth, but then I end up going back to my original, kind of like with clothes. I'll try on like 100 outfits and then I'll just go back to what I was wearing.
Yes, it's like how you have to know the rules to break the rules. You have to see what's out there to just go back to the same thing.
That's right. So for here, I really got into it with her eyes. I think it looks so cool because if you ever looked at like a reflection of a pupil, usually you're seeing like a window from across the room, but you have no idea that's what it is. So I just wanted to do some like really abstract shapes in here and just play around with like, different things to see what I ended up liking and what I didn't like. And it kind of gives this like really cool like effect. And I also did some freckles on her, which was really fun. I did this cute little star, and with the freckles, when you do dots, you have to like, it's kind of tricky because I think has to do with the Apple Pen, but you have to push, pretty hard sometimes. And then the next one, it will be different. So if you change your mind and you decide to go into pixel mode, there's other brushes that you can use that will give a similar effect. So I decided to try that. And I went into noise and spatter. So I'll show you what that looks like.
Oh, cool.
So spatter gives you a great variety of, different size.
Like a consistent spatter, right?
It is.
There is some variation within all of those little dots, but it's a pretty consistent brush flow that you have right there.
Yes. And you can see the difference. Like it's pixel, right? Everything else you're seeing right now on these top layers is vector. So you can see how pixelated it actually is versus like how crisp the vector is.
Wow. So, yes. You can definitely tell that contrast when you zoom in.
Yeah. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. So I tried that. And then I did try noise. And I'm going to change my brush color to the orange. So the noise was similar and it was a little bit softer. But I still felt like it wasn't the right brush for this particular piece. So then I just went in myself and I did all these dots with my favorite vector brush. And I think it turned out pretty good. So
yes. You have to like see what's out there to decide like, oh, you know what? I think I prefer that first idea that I had, the first way I implemented it.
Right.
But it's cool to see that there's so many different brushes that can help you out, right? Like,
yeah,
I can totally see that splatter brush coming in handy for something else down the road.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's great for background drawing, like flooding color and adding texture. But as you can see, for some reason, the freckles are not agreeing with me right now, but that's okay.
It happens, I think, because the stylus pressure is like more sensitive when you're going across the screen as opposed to just like ticking it.
Yeah. Luckily, these are done already, so I don't have to worry about doing those right now.
Experiment with your freckles, everyone. Have a little patience. You'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out.
But it's the same vector brush that you were using for the lines, right?
Yes, it is. So after, I did her face and I added that cute little star. And then I was like, okay, what shapes do I want to put on her head? And so I thought, peace sign, I obviously love that symbol. And then the heart, and I added that little shape in there from earlier when I brought up the splash shape that is in Fresco already that you can, choose to bring in anywhere. So I can show you again how that works.
Yes, show us how you create that and how you incorporate those shapes into your process.
Okay, so I'll go back to my green and then I'll hit fill. And so there's the green. And the reason it looks different is because we don't have the same layer property on this one. So the blending mode is different. So this is normal. So if I went back to linear dodge, like the chat agreed with and you agreed with, it's still going to be different. But what's cool about this is if you push, hang on. I don't know why it does that. It gives you like an extra one.
I think it's because it's like a template and then you fill it and then you have to like
go back,
get rid of the template or something like that is how I think of it.
So now if I move it like in a different area, you'll see how the color changes.
Yes. And you can start experimenting with where to place it.
Exactly. So, that's kind of how I did the background too. So, if I was to add this to the background, then it would be more yellow at the bottom. But I put it on her little hat and I'm going to bring it back up there. And then I just like erased the part that I didn't want to show. So let's say we're going to keep this one on here and then I would go back to done. And then I would take my eraser and I would make sure it's big enough. And then I would go back and erase where I think the pattern should stop. So maybe at this fold right here. And now it's just like another part of the hat.
That's so cool. Now it's just like another part of the little painting and it just fits right in there naturally as opposed to kind of like, just going right over your entire drawing, this is a way to integrate it.
Yeah. And I just love all the shapes that Fresco has. And I know you can upload your own patterns like from Capture, if you're using Adobe Capture to bring patterns in your library. So you can do that too.
Capture is so, I feel like underrated. It's one of my favorite tools because I feel like it really lets you use what you see out in the world and bring it in. Like it's like bringing it home. It's like catching a Pokemon or something. You get to just bring it home with you and see how you're gonna implement it. Like you said, you can capture shapes and bring them in. You can capture color, which is one of my favorite things to do, and even fonts too. It can like identify fonts for you. So if
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, you can like take a picture of, let's say, a sign that you think is really cool, and it will like try to identify a font, and then it'll load it into your library, so you can just bring it in. So if you were to use like the text tool here, it would like populate it for you. So
that's awesome.
Another handy way to use Adobe Capture. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, run and get it.
Yeah. I just started using it, so I still have a lot to learn with that. So what do
It's
you
only
guys?
going to make it more fun for you, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So what do you guys think about what color? Like I'm thinking I kind of actually like this purplish.
I like that too because it has like a cool gradient.
Yeah, and it picks up the sketch. You can see like the grittiness of the sketch underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might actually erase this part though. I don't want it to
Distracting.
compete from my peace sign, but yeah, just I think I'll keep it, you know, if anyone has any other thoughts, but for now I'll keep it on that. And so if we're moving forward, I'm going to bring in that layer that I hid earlier just for that extra fluorescent glow under her t-shirt. And then I'm also going to bring her nose ring back in. And I'm going to make that nose ring a little more detailed. And I think I'll use a green highlight. Let's see how that looks.
I'm excited to see this nose ring just glisten.
Yeah, let's see if we can bring it to life a little bit.
Yes, that looks cool. And I like that you use that green that you've been using on some other elements just to kind of make it feel cohesive.
Yeah, exactly. I think I might make it a little thicker. And my smoothing needs to come down just a little bit. So let's see.
Nice. Undo. A nice healthy undo.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, that pops a little bit more.
Yeah, I really like that. It kind of complements the inner eye glow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Right? And they're close to each other. Makes
your eye flow. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I know you can, while you're working here, I have some more questions for you about your career and your artwork and your process.
Okay.
While we watch you hatch and develop this piece even further. So do you have any tips for finding your own character style? I feel like that can take forever. And I know that a lot of people are interested in speeding up that process. So if you have any tips for finding your own style and maybe how you found your style,
sure.
If you want to share with everyone on the stream today.
Sure, that would be great. That's a great question. So when I went to college, I, went for animation because I wanted to do character design and build my own video games. And that was when 3D modeling was like just now entering the world. And 3D Studio Max and Maya were like the big programs. And I'm a big gamer too, so I would play video games and I would see all these different characters, and I knew what I was drawn to, a very stylized look. And I obviously have a very unique style as far as like, I don't always like to make things look realistic. I tend to stylize things a lot. And my art teachers always said, that's great, but if you want to learn, you have to break out of your comfort zone. But what helped me a lot to figure out what style I liked was going through art school and doing a lot of the fine art drawing classes. And I would study anatomy and I would, stay up late and just draw, different characters and at all different angles. Storyboarding also really helped, just doing visual stories and bringing those characters to life, incorporating my personality and stuff like that. And so I noticed like a very early age that I loved drawing women and I loved drawing, different body types and very curvy and stylized. And then I just kind of refined that style over time. And I think that when you are looking to figure things out outside of yourself and maybe trying to make things look more like somebody else's because you see success in that, can actually really stifle you. And that's what it did to me, because I was like, why am I not rich and famous yet? But like, it just takes so much time, right? And it takes knowing people and it takes a lot of work. And so once I went back to like what I loved doing and just refined that instead of trying to make my stuff look like what I thought other people wanted, that's exactly when things started happening for me. And I'll tell you this, somebody told me that exact same thing. And I was like, you can be quiet because I don't want to hear that. But that's what actually worked for me. So, it's kind of like when your parents tell you, well, I know from experience, blah, blah, blah. Just do what you love and just make it better. Just do what you love, make it better. It will happen for you.
Yes,
You'll figure out your style.
Perfect your process and your like product, right? Your finished product, your entire process, perfect that, as opposed to imitating what you perceive as like what's great right now, what's trending right now, because what's trending will always change, but what you like to create, that's like in you, right? And that if you perfect that, no one can take that away from you either,
exactly.
right? That trend's not going to ever go away.
That's right.
But it is true. It's hard advice to swallow, I guess, right? Because it's like, oh, I just have to do me more, right? And I'm just trying to do what everyone else, what I think everyone wants,
right?
And there is a fine line between like what you think that you like to create and what maybe you're imitating. Sometimes that can be blurred, right? Like it can be easily influenced. So I don't know if you found getting inspiration, indirect inspiration, so not just from other artists, but like you said, nature and just other elements, if that was helpful in your process too.
It was. And, I think I used to feel like, oh, I'm not a real artist if I'm not doing A, B, C, D. A lot of times, even the same, I think this has been a struggle for a lot of traditional artists to move to digital. Oh, well, I'm not a real artist because it's digital. Oh, because there's Control Z. Oh, because there's this, there's that. And I had to just make those voices shut up and just be like, you know what? I'm enjoying this. And if somebody has a problem, then that's fine. That's their opinion. But I like it. Other people may like it too. And maybe they'll be inspired by it, because I know when I see digital artists do things, I don't say they're fake artists, right? I think that they're amazing. So I think it just depends on like what your goals are. And if your goals are character design and you're struggling with that, then I think, do a little research on what you like to draw and where it's being applied. So if you see your style in other video games and you're wanting to, hone in on that style because you like it and it just so happens to be already out there, there's no shame in that. Like, perfect it, keep at it. Finish your drawings. I used to never finish things when I was young. I used to always be like starting something. And it's because, like I mentioned earlier in the stream, I would draw I wouldn't draw the stuff that I should be drawing first. I wouldn't do my sketch. I wouldn't do my shape blocks, my silhouettes, all that. I would go straight to an eyeball and I'd draw it and then I would hate it. And then I would throw that away. So I think it's important to like push yourself to finish pieces, even if they may not start out great, and just keep practicing, like draw every day, because it's important.
I think finishing pieces is really great advice, because as you go from start to finish, even if you are dreading, let's say, the piece halfway through, it's still teaching you something, right? Like you're learning. Like you said, I should have done the base sketch. I should have worked out my proportions before I got to this stage, right?
Right.
But you wouldn't learn that if you quit within the hour.
That's right.
You wouldn't learn that what you need to improve in your process. So even bad drawings teach you something, right? And help influence you moving forward. So I agree. I totally agree with you. Putting in the hours, getting familiar with your process, your style is going to lead to your style and your ultimate success, creative success.
100%.
And I also agree that there's a little taboo with digital art being perceived as whatever we're saying is real art. But yeah, it's another tool. It's another tool in your artistic toolbox, the same way that you use the non-photo blue pencil, the same way that you might use acrylic. Digital tools are just another way to kind of harness your creativity and perfect your practice. So 100%. I definitely throw those kinds of criticisms away and just perfect your own work, whether that's digital or traditional or a mixture of both.
I agree. Totally agree.
Beautiful. Okay, guys, if you're watching us from YouTube, come over to Behance, behance.net/Adobe Live, join our chat, drop your questions, get them answered. We have a good time over here. And if you're just joining us, we're watching Melissa Showers show us her character design process using Adobe Fresco on the iPad. If you've been curious about Fresco, but you haven't dared open it yet, this is kind of it's a signal to open up the app and get started drawing, and join us here today and bring your questions if you have any.
Yes, definitely.
Amazing. If you're watching us right now, why don't you tell us where you're watching us from? It's always exciting seeing where everyone is tuning in from. It's a good time over here. I have been loving watching this process and seeing how you add all this detail that just gives it like this magic.
Thank you. I'm all about the magic for sure.
I can see it. It really, you've created like this whole world from the reference image. It's really beautiful to see like
Thank you.
How you can go from kind of like, a normal reference image and really turn it into something that's totally your own.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to take things and just go with it and not put the pressure on yourself so much all the time to make it so perfect or, look a certain way. I think when you can get loose and just give yourself permission to experiment is when you grow, instead of like stifling yourself and putting yourself in a box that you think people want you to be in.
Yeah. Speaking of like reference photos and how you interpret them, what do you think makes a good reference photos? Because I feel like there is an art to selecting a good reference photos. There's totally some photos that just end up not working. I've learned the hard way.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on what I'm like trying to do. If it's going to be something realistic, then the lighting is everything, because I want to see those big highlights and I want to see those really dark shadows, because that's where, I would never draw all of these hairs in a realism photo. You're just suggesting it with light and like a little bit of detail. When it comes to something like this, where I want to get more involved in all the little details, then for me, it's like, okay, hair, I want to see the flowy hair. I want to see if it's like a blank slate where I can add a bunch of embellishment to it and fun shapes. But I think the number one thing for me is really just feeling that emotion of the photo, and whatever mood I'm in, I will connect to a certain photo. And if it inspires me and moves me, and I think about it from all those aspects, then I'm usually saving it in my mood board in Behance and going back to it. I mean, I have like hundreds of pictures on there that I'll just scroll back through and I'll be like, okay, what am I going to draw next? And then that day in particular, I'll feel drawn to something, because of the way I feel that day.
That's amazing. Yes, that's really good tips for reference photos. It's like you have to love the image, and depending on what you're going to use it for, you might want to pay attention to a few details that'll make your life a little easier. I definitely feel like when there's a reference photo and the light's coming from multiple places, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't pick it if I don't want to do that. Or, if I can't see the detail in the face and I'm really trying to bring out the detail in the face, it's like a choice that you have to decide if you're going to then add it, or if you want to have a reference image to help guide you there.
Right. Yeah.
And I definitely think reference photos are awesome tools to kind of just help you throughout your process. And you should definitely, use a reference photo if you need one.
Yeah, don't shy away from it or feel like it's cheating or copying. I think that everything that has been made, as far as art's concerned, has already been made somewhere and you just don't even know it. So, it's like, okay to use reference photos. It can help you learn. And it's also a huge compliment to whoever the artist is, or whoever's in the photo, if you have their permission. I've done a lot of art shows where I've met people and they've just been so inspiring to me. And I've said, can I draw you? And so I actually have several of those on my Behance page. And it's because these are amazing humans. They're also artists, and they happen to be, models or whatever they are. And, and I'm not saying like they're Versace models. These are just regular people that like, that's their craft and they love photography. And I'm like inspired by them. And so I have so many different women that I've drawn on my profile page on Behance. And, they're so like happy about it, and they're, oh, can you print this for me and I'll buy it. So it's great to also set up your own photo shoots for reference photos if you're worried about permissions or something like that, or just go to Adobe Stock and then you can just license it and you don't have to ever worry about that.
There you go, guys.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. You license photos if you want to. I think it's amazing to do your own photo shoots, even if it's just with yourself. I know there's so many artists that have folders full of reference photos of themselves that can be silly sometimes. But if you need a specific angle, sometimes it's really hard to search for it, like left hand twisted holding bottle this very specific way. You can just do it yourself. Definitely encourage that. And those are some really helpful tips for people who don't know how to incorporate reference photos into their process, but like are interested in it. Really, really amazing. Remember, guys, you can drop your own questions in the Behance chat while we're still here working with Melissa. Drop your questions, get them answered. Have a fun time here with us. So tell me what you're doing here with this pink vector brush that you're working with.
Yeah, so I just just on a whim was like, oh, I'll just bring in some pink. Because there's pink in the background here in this background shape, even though it's a little bit muted. I thought it would be nice to add another color. So right now I'm just like deciding where I want that to land. So anywhere where I have like a huge highlight, I'm seeing if it makes sense to like add that pink or if it's going to be too much. So it seems to be working out so far. And this layer is a normal layer. So I haven't changed anything to the properties of this particular layer, but it is adding a little more dimension to the highlights. So I'm just kind of going back to, all these multiple layers of highlights, adding the pink. Pink and green is always a nice combination too. So I think it looks cool. It just gives that kind of added dimension.
Yes, you're definitely playing with a lot of color theory. You have the orange with that like the orangey red with the blues. You have the green and the pink. You have the orange and the highlights, so on top of the blue person. So it's so interesting to see how all these different colors can play together and just create something that feels like otherworldly.
Yeah, she's she kind of reminds me of, I don't know if anyone is this old to know this, but she kind of reminds me of Rainbow Bright. I don't know if anybody knows
I can totally see that. Yes.
Yeah. Because Rainbow Bright had a little star in her cheek. And she actually also reminds me of my son's girlfriend. She's 15 and she's just adorable. And so that's another reason I think why I chose this picture, because her name is Elle and she's been such a sweetheart with like all this drawing stuff. Her and my son, Sean, they are always being very helpful of what they think is cool, because I'm old, so I need help with
you
that.
Always need just a little bit of a confirmation, it always helps. It
really does.
I know what you mean. I have some Gen Z experts I try to turn to as well.
Right. Cool.
But this is turning out beautiful, and I love those highlights, and there's so much like detail there. How are you choosing where you put a lot of detail versus where you put less detail? Like, what is your thinking there? Because I can tell it's very deliberate.
Yeah, I think it's a trial and error. A lot of times, like I know like the star of this is her hair and her face. So even though like I may want to go crazy and add more patterns and stuff on her hat, I might even go back and erase some of this stuff, because I like to keep negative space in a lot of my drawings too, because I don't want to steal away from the main focal point. I think it's important to bring in your backgrounds and make sure everything feels cohesive. So I may add a few things to the background here, but I'm mainly focusing on all the detail like in her hair and in her face. Yes. I don't want to overwork it too much. And, my insecurities as an artist, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this too much? I think everybody questions themselves sometimes, but yeah, so I'll try and dial back before I overwork it like crazy, and make sure I just stick to where I think these details should be added.
Yeah, I can totally see what you mean. I don't think you're overworking it. I think that it looks really cool and you're really bringing the hair and the face to life. Thank you. I think that that's amazing, because that's where we want to draw all of the attention to, right? And so on the pieces and the parts where you want to guide the eye towards the hair by eliminating some of the distractions that you could right? Because I'm sure you could, add so much detail to the shirt or to her hat, but it may then compete for your eye and kind of leave the viewer maybe like overstimulated.
Right.
So this is a really nice way to kind of control the attention. And you also have like the forms of the hair kind of guiding you in and out of her face. So I think it's really neat to see like how you're making these choices.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to bring up just now, because it just happened, is when you have, and I think I brought this up earlier, when you have the smoothing all the way up like this.
Okay.
So let's say I'm trying to draw like a curved line. See how straight it is? You can't really get.
Oh, and are you curving it? Because
I am.
Like, are you?
Yeah. Sorry, you can't see that. I forgot. But so same exact curve. I'm going to bring it down to 21. Now it's actually curving.
There you go. Okay.
So just something to keep in mind when you're using that tool is that you'll lose the natural, movement of your hand if you're trying to do some like curving techniques with line quality, if you have that smoothing all the way up. If you're trying to do it fast. I feel like,
if you're working fast and you get suddenly frustrated and you're like, why isn't it paying attention to me? Is my pencil broken? Like what just happened?
Yeah.
It could just be the smoothing effect. Maybe you went a little overboard. You got to dial it down for that specific section, and then you can boost it back up later. That's a really good tip, because I feel like it's those kinds of things that frustrate you when you're working, and then you have to like stop and Google and figure out, and it can be like the simplest solution that maybe you already like forgot because it was so intuitive when you kind of boosted the smoothing in the first place.
It is. It's when you're learning something new too. You just have to remember, and it can be a lot to remember sometimes. Yes.
I was wondering if you've ever played with the Fresco Animation Tools before, because I know we're on the iPad, Adobe Fresco for iPad, in case you're just tuning in. Have you played with any of those animation tools?
I have. I have a project. It's on Behance right now. And
let's take a look at it if you want.
Okay, that sounds great. So here's my Behance page. And here's a drawing that I did. And you can see that it's animated.
Yes, that's so neat.
So it's so fun. I was so excited to know that Fresco was bringing in an animation tool, and it's really simple. So, you can just go in there and you can draw frame by frame, different things that you want to be animated. These are my reference credits. That's the actual model. And I just like animated. I brought her in and animated the little shape below. And then here's all the photography credits. But Fresco is, I'm going to hype it up as much as possible, because there's just so many things you can do in it. And these are just very simple movements, but it adds so much to a drawing.
Yeah, it just like brings this other element that you almost didn't know you could bring to your drawings until you discover that Fresco has these powerful tools. And I bet, especially with your animation background, that you really like understand where to add that movement. And even though this is like, technically it's a very small animation, it still adds a lot of movement to this character, the blinking, the waving of the skirt, just with those simple little animations that you were able to pull off.
Yeah, it's a learning curve. It was like learning from, as if I never knew how to use animation. So, you have to kind of brush off, but yeah, it was definitely a fun one to animate. I loved it.
That's so cool. Can you show us where that animation panel is, just for those viewers who maybe didn't even know it existed?
So let's see. If you go to the bottom right, you can see here that any layer. So let me get out of these layers so I can.
Yes, I don't want you to mess up any of your layers.
Yeah, let's do a new layer. So
there we go.
If you see here at the bottom, this is where your clean frame is. So let's say I wanted to animate her eye blinking. I don't know if I'll be able to do this.
We'll see what we get to, but at least, we're understanding where everything is.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much time I have left, but let's see. So in this first frame, it's open. So we'll go to the next frame here, and I will see if we can just quickly show you. So I'm drawing.
Yes, we have almost 15 minutes left. So I think you may be able to pull it off, or at least show us, the basics.
Okay. So I'm just drawing her eye closed right now on top. And it's on a new layer.
So neat. With the vector tool too.
With the vector tool. The brush is way too big. And it's not going to be perfect, but...
Well, that's the cool thing with animation is a lot of the time it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to kind of gesture the movement and give the look of it. And your eye, the viewer's eye will naturally kind of fill in the little
the blanks.
Movements. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm just, for the sake of time, going to close that off so you can't see her eyelashes. And then I'm going to go back with my eyedropper tool and pick that color so it looks a little more natural. And then let's see. So if we were to go back to...
Yes, this might be a little tricky just because we didn't set up this file necessarily for animation.
That's okay. Let's see. Yeah, see, okay, so it's showing you the play all, but I think that this is something that, you know, is easy to remember, but sometimes not always easy to remember. So this layer was started in a pixel. So
Got it.
If you go to vector, it's going to bring a new layer in automatically. So I have to start this layer in vector. So I'm just going to delete this. And it's going to ask you, you know, motion, you know, was created on that layer. You sure? So let's go to the vector brush. So now I'm here with the motion open at the bottom.
Got it.
I'm just going to quickly draw her eye closed.
Right, because whatever brush you're using is the kind of layer that it's going to create.
Yeah, exactly. Vector or pixel. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to duplicate the frame. And then I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to
brush it out a little bit.
Oh, whoops. I'm going to actually delete it. So,
oh, okay.
Let's see.
Got it.
So it's too fast.
Just fast.
So if you duplicate an empty frame, it will give you more time.
Yes.
And then we can just duplicate this one twice. Let's see what happens. So that's just like the most basic thing. Now, obviously it doesn't look great because I just did it in a few seconds. But if we were to go back and, you know, really kind of
spend time
and, you know, make sure that the lashes make sense and make sure that it's blended in. And you can also convert this to a pixel layer, and then you can take your blend tool and, well, let's see if it'll let me. Should be able to brush it out, but
yeah, definitely should. I think there's just another layer on top of it or something.
Yeah, you're right. So you have like onion skin capability, so you can see every layer that's in these motion frames. So here it's actually more blended, but way too blended. But so if we play all again, let's say we just zoom out so you can see. So it's like she's winking.
Yes, so cool and so simple. I mean, you can really spend time there creating those layers and get it perfect, but it's just really cool that you can just be doing this on the iPad, you know, while you're sitting on the couch or you're on the beach. Let's say if that's where you like to animate, you could go ahead and just play with it right within this without having to move over to something more robust like After Effects or even desktop Photoshop.
Yep. 100%. It's really cool tool.
Very neat. All right, Melissa, we have about 10 minutes left of this stream. Okay. What else are we doing to this piece?
So I think the last thing I would probably do would be maybe adding a little bit more to the background just to like bring it together. Because right now there's so much detail on her and the background is really basic. So I think what I'll do is I'll go into these shapes.
I just want to give you a heads up that you're still in the animation panel just in case that throws anything off.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, let me get off of that. Thank you very much. So I think I'll go in and I'll take this pink and I'll bring it up a little bit to make it a little bit brighter. And I will use a vector layer. Let me get rid of this pixel layer.
Got it. Remember, guys, if you're tuning in here on Behance, Drop in your questions. We still have time here with Melissa. She can still answer any doubts that you have about Adobe Fresco or about character design while you still have her here live. So come on in, bring your questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer anything. So I'm just gonna like see if this is something that will add value or take away. So
okay,
right now I feel like it might be a little too bright. So I think what I'm actually gonna do is go in with the orange that's already there here and do a little bit of hatching outside of these shapes.
Nice.
And just to tie it in a little bit more.
Right, to tie in the background with all of the figure.
Yes.
The details that the figure has.
Yes. So maybe mimicking some of the shapes that are in her hair, some of the hatching.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to kind of tie the foreground with the background a little bit more. Yeah. That way everything feels just a touch more cohesive.
Yeah, just to kind of bring it together a little bit, but not too much because I definitely don't want to steal the attention away from her. So yes, yeah, that's
like a little fine balance that you have to play between the background and whatever you want taking all the attention.
Yes.
Gorgeous. I love seeing this.
Thank you.
Seeing it all come together so beautifully.
She really did. She really came together. She was a lot of fun to make, a lot of fun to draw.
She looks it. She's so like bright and vivid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
She looks like she's ready to party.
She is ready.
Right? Is she going to Coachella? Maybe
she is. She should. I mean,
she may as well go.
She's dressed for it.
Definitely. I love that those the cross hatching kind of creates a lot of movement too.
It does.
How do you like think about the direction for hatching? I know this can be kind of hard when you're just starting out.
I think I'm a lefty, so like it naturally is going, to the right for me in that diagonal angle. So that's more of a natural thing. But I think when it comes to highlights, obviously there's movement in all of these different directions. So if the lights, it's really about the light source. And then the shape, like you have to think about like under her eye, like would it make sense for it to be going in this direction or this direction, right? So I think it's just choosing which direction from the beginning for certain areas and then sticking with it.
Yeah, like playing towards the volume of what you think would go there, right?
Right.
Like the lashes are fanning out because that's where your mind goes in terms of lashes. Same with like the volume on the lips, but you do get some of that opposing crosshatch when you want to add, I guess, a little bit more depth.
Yeah, and like it could be anywhere. It could be right there. If I like it, great. If I don't, I'll just undo it. So that's the beauty of digital, is you can just do so much experimentation.
I know there's so much freedom. Do you ever bring your Fresco files into Photoshop on desktop, or do you tend to just finish right within Fresco?
I do. I may bring her in, I may not, but tomorrow I'll be showing another kind of style, and it's a little more realistic. It's going to be a lot more pixel drawing and a lot more blending. And I do bring her into Photoshop to change like hue, saturation, and change some textures and things that they don't quite have available yet in Fresco, just to fine tune things. And then I'll usually bring it back into Fresco, and then I'll fine tune it even further.
Yes, that's the beauty of working within the Creative Cloud ecosystem, is you can kind of bounce around between these programs freely, and you still working within the same file, which is really cool. That way you don't end up with like V20 of the same drawing, which can happen anyway, but it's the less of that you can, the more of that you can avoid, the better.
Exactly.
Melissa, can you give us, we have to start wrapping up in a little bit here.
Sure.
Can you give us a recap of everything that we learned with you here today?
Sure.
And what we can expect for tomorrow?
Sure. So today we took this great reference photo. Ooh, looks like I drew on her by accident. And we brought her into Fresco, and I basically went over all the different phase activities of my drawing process. So I'm just going to hide these layers quickly and I'll show you how that worked. So we started here with the sketching layer, and then we went through all the different phases of that. And then we brought in the vector layer, and we brought in the background color layers. And then we brought in some fine tuning for all these different details. And then we just kind of brought it all together. I'm going to be basically doing the same thing tomorrow with a different character. And she's got a much softer vibe, and she's kind of more ethereal. So it's not going to look as precise as this. It'll be, tomorrow will be the same time from 11:30 to 1 p.m. Central. And I'm going to take you through that process. I hope you guys can join and have any other questions that, I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, Melissa, this has been incredible. It was amazing to see how you can take this reference photo and bring it into a stylized character design using Adobe Fresco for the iPad. It's been amazing to watch you work and get you to answer some questions from our creative community here. Anthony Carvajal was wondering if we're hooked up to an external monitor. Maybe
I have my
the
MacBook.
iPad. I think they're wondering about the iPad. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's just hooked in.
Yeah, but I don't draw this way. This is just for the live stream. But I'm on my iPad, and then it's directly wired into my MacBook, and then I have my other monitors too.
Yes. That's just in case you're interested in streaming, you can plug your iPad right in. That's the beauty of working with an iPad. So once again, like Melissa said, we'll be back tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Pacific for part 2 of designing characters in Adobe Fresco. Now, be sure to stick around for the creative encores of the Illustrator Creative Challenges with Julia Vaca immediately, followed by how to edit videos for YouTube in Premiere with Javier Mercedes. Join Javier as he shows you how to select the right footage, how to cut your video, shows off how to stay organized, and even some tips and tricks on working with clients and exporting best practices. So be sure to catch that. Now, thanks so much for being here with us today. Be sure to follow Melissa everywhere: Behance, Instagram. Go check out her website, and we'll see you back here, same time, same place. Thanks again, everyone, for joining the chat. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.